Come on, get your cockles. Je voudrais. Yeah, what's that? Les petits manger. Breakfast, is it? Deux billets. 2 tickets, s'il vous plaît. Any time, governor. Come again. Down and out in Paris and London. The podcast. Oh, lovely. Back we are then for chapter 4. Oh, a bit of hyperbaton there, wasn't it? Back we are for chapter 4. Let's get stuck into this, shall we? I've gone back to the old-fashioned way of doing this, where I'm putting my phone through a little mixer and playing the audio book, and then pausing it as we go, which I think is a slightly quicker way for me to do it. So, without any further ado, let's have a bit of chapter 4, shall we?
One day, my English lessons ceased abruptly. The weather was getting hot, and one of my pupils, feeling too lazy to go on with his lessons, dismissed me. The other disappeared from his lodgings without notice, owing me 12 francs. I was left with only 30 centimes, and no tobacco. For a day and a half I had nothing to eat or smoke, and then, too hungry to put it off any longer, I packed my remaining clothes into my suitcase and took them to the pawn shop. This put an end to all pretence of being in funds, for I could not take my clothes out of the hotel without asking Madame F's leave. I remember, however, how surprised she was at my asking her, instead of removing the clothes on the sly, shooting the moon being a common trick in our quarter.
So shooting the moon is a metaphor. It's quite a nice metaphor, I like it. It just means to leave without paying, to rush out without paying. So you might do it in a restaurant, or you might do it in a hotel. I mean, not me, obviously, and not you, good grief. Heaven forbid. But that's the metaphor there, shooting the moon. And I only mention that because, well, partly because it's an obscure reference, but also because it gets used again a few times. So it's worth just having that in the back of your mind.
It was the first time that I had been into a French pawn shop. One went through grandiose stone portals marked, of course, Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité. They write that even over the police stations in France. Into a large, bare room like a school classroom, with a counter and rows of benches. 40 or 50 people were waiting. One handed one's pledge over the counter and sat down. Presently, when the clerk had assessed its value, he would call out, "Numero such and such, will you take 50 francs? Sometimes it was only 15 francs, or 10, or 5. Whatever it was, the whole room knew it. As I came in, the clerk called with an air of offence, "Numero 83 here," and gave a little whistle and a beckon, as though calling a dog. Numero 83 stepped to the counter.
Almost missed me there, passed it by. The little bit of zoomorphism there, that simile, gave a little whistle and beckon as though calling a dog. What we find, I would say, far and away, the most used technique in this is zoomorphism. And it gets particularly heightened as we get into London later on, but it's fairly frequent and, what's the word? I want to say obsequious, that's not the right word at all. Oh, that's annoying. Oh, it's going to really bug me now. I bet you're shouting at your phones and computers. Ubiquitous, that's the word, ubiquitous. Yes, it's very ubiquitous throughout the whole book, is zoomorphism. And again, I mean, you can think back to Funda, she uses it a fair bit there, doesn't she, to refer to people in quite derogatory, unflattering terms. So it's we're no stranger to zoomorphism, but particularly here it seems to be used quite prevalently and ubiquitously.
He was an old, bearded man with an overcoat buttoned up at the neck and frayed trouser ends. Without a word, the clerk shot the bundle across the counter. Evidently it was worth nothing. It fell to the ground and came open, displaying 4 pairs of men's woolen pants. No one could help laughing. Poor Numero 83 gathered up his pants and shambled out, muttering to himself. The clothes I was pawning, together with the suitcase, had cost over £20 and were in good condition. I thought they must be worth £10, and a quarter of this, one expects a quarter value at a pawn shop, was 250 or 300 francs. I waited without anxiety, expecting 200 francs at the worst. At last, the clerk called my number. Numero 97. Yes, I said, standing up. 70 francs. 70 francs for £10 worth of clothes. but it was no use arguing. I had seen someone else attempt to argue, and the clerk had instantly refused the pledge. I took the money and the pawn ticket and walked out.
Just before we get too much further, I forgot to mention at the top of the page, certainly in my copy anyway, the motto there, liberté, égalité and fraternité, is sort of as its origins in the French Revolution. And I think that's important to bear in mind as we read through this half of the book, that this does come from, there is a sort of indignation, I guess, from the French people, a sense of revolution, rebelliousness maybe, and so that the phrasing of those three, that the motto of those three words, liberty, equality and fraternity, as being the motto from the French Revolution, suggests that idea of freedom, and it's something which the French people seem particularly proud of, and it's just worth being aware that this is, the revolution, although it was a long time in the past, even then, is still something which shaped French culture and the French people. And I'm sure you'll probably know more about it than I do with the work that you both do in French. But it's certainly worth thinking about that and having that at the back of your mind as we're reading through this section, because it is a strong identifier of the people, and particularly the Parisians, I think, who are sort of particularly strong-minded in that sense. And I think still are to this day in some regards as well.
I had now no clothes except what I stood up in, the coat badly out at elbow, an overcoat moderately pawnable, and one spare shirt. Afterwards, when it is too late, I learned that it is wiser to go to a pawn shop in the afternoon. The clerks are French, and like most French people, are in a bad temper till they have eaten their lunch.
Just a quick thing there, but I mean, just that sort of generalising about French people there, the sort of the temper of the French people in a bad temper to live eating their lunch. It's sort of stereotypical. It's playing on that idea of French temper and French obsession with food and appetites. But like many stereotypes and cliches, there's often some truth in them. So it's worth having them there. And I think Funda used those to some extent with her presentation of the German people, and particularly the difference between the West and the East Germans. I think if you look at the comparisons there and the type of people that they were, just worth thinking about how stereotypes and generalizations are used.
When I got home, Madame F. was sweeping the bistro floor. She came up the steps to meet me. I could see in her eye that she was uneasy about my rent. "Well," she said, "what did you get for your clothes? Not much, eh?" 200 francs, I said promptly. "Tiens," she said, surprised. "Well, that's not bad. How expensive those English clothes must be." The lie saved a lot of trouble, and, strangely enough, it came true. A few days later I did receive exactly 200 francs due to me for a newspaper article, and though it hurt to do it, I at once paid every penny of it in rent. So though I came near to starving in the following weeks, I was hardly ever without a roof. It was now absolutely necessary to find work, and I remembered a friend of mine, a Russian waiter named Boris, who might be able to help me. I had first met him in the public ward of a hospital, where he was being treated for arthritis in the left leg. He had told me to come to him if I were ever in difficulties. I must say something about Boris, for he was a curious character and my close friend for a long time. He was a big, soldierly man of about 35, and had been good-looking, but since his illness he had grown immensely fat from lying in bed. Like most Russian refugees, he had had an adventurous life. His parents, killed in the revolution, had been rich people, and he had served through the war in the 2nd Siberian Rifles, which according to him was the best regiment in the Russian army. After the war he had first worked in a brush factory, then as a porter at Les Halles, then had become a dishwasher, and had finally worked his way up to be a waiter. When he fell ill, he was at the Hotel Scribe, and was taking 100 francs a day in tips. His ambition was to become a maître d'hôtel, save 50,000 francs, and set up a small select restaurant on the right bank. Boris always talked of the war as the happiest time of his life. War and soldiering were his passion. He had read innumerable books of strategy and military history, and could tell you all about the theories of Napoleon, Kutuzov, Clausewitz, Moltke, and Foch. Anything to do with soldiers pleased him. His favourite café was the Closerie des Lilas in Montparnasse, simply because the statue of Marshal Ney stands outside it. Later on, Boris and I sometimes went to the Rue de Commerce together. If we went by metro, Boris always got out at Cambronne station instead of Commerce, though Commerce was nearer. He liked the association with General Cambronne, who was called on to surrender at Waterloo, and answered simply, "Merde."
So just backing up that paragraph a little bit, we've got the asyndetic list there of the theories of Napoleon and so on. I won't try and pronounce some of those. Just that asyndetic list of these people, these military strategists and leaders that Boris is sort of inspired by and obsessed with to some extent. And then at the end of that paragraph, we've got the first of, I think maybe the first, is it, in the book? First of many taboo words, and you'll know better than I do what that means. Merde, meaning shit, as far as I'm aware. And so we've got the first of the printable taboo words. I mean, there are many later on, and even in the first half, in the Paris section, that are not printable and they're just censored. But clearly taboo language is what we'd expect from the sort of lives they're living. It's difficult, it's stressful, it brings with it a certain drinking culture and a certain addictiveness or an addictive sort of personalities. So it's no surprise that we find drinking and gambling and swearing and everything else. So that's just the first example we have there. And giving it to us in French there, I think, is even more useful. And we saw that with Thunder as well, giving us the German language. It makes it more authentic. And we're sort of treated almost fly on the wall, like we can sort of hear and we experience it as he experienced it himself in that, through him we're hearing what these people sound like.
The only things left to Boris by the revolution were his medals and some photographs of his old regiment. He'd kept these when everything else went to the pawn shop. Almost every day he would spread the photographs out on the bed and talk about them. "Voilà, mon ami, there you see me at the head of my company, big fine man, eh? Not like these little rats of Frenchmen. A captain at 20, not bad, eh? Yes, a captain in the 2nd Siberian Rifles, and my father was a colonel. Ah, me, mon ami, the ups and downs of life. A captain in the Russian army, and then piff, the revolution, every penny gone. In 1916, I stayed a week at the Hotel Edward Set. In 1920, I was trying for a job as night watchman there. I've been night watchman, cellarman, floor scrubber, dishwasher, porter, lavatory attendant. I have tipped waiters, and I have been tipped by waiters."
What a great voice. It sounds like the meerkat. So we have the asyndetic list there, don't we, of the jobs he's done, the menial tasks that he's done, the night watchman, cellarman, floor scrubber, dishwasher, porter, lavatory attendant. And then you've got let me just think about this. I've tipped waiters and I've been tipped by waiters. You've got... Yeah, it's I was trying to decide if it's chiasmus or antimetabole. I'm going to go with, I mean, they're both very similar, but I'm going to go with antimetabole because it's a direct inversion of the words and the word order. So this is when the word order in a phrase is inverted. So an example is Bruce Forsyth's "nice to see you nice." Or there's a classic one about never let a fool kiss you and never let a kiss fool you. You're just flipping the word order around. So it sort of functions that it's not perfect because, well, it isn't, is it? I have tipped waiters and I've been tipped by waiters. There's that inversion there of that the word by, sort of inverting it there. Let's go with antimetabole. So ANTIMETABOLE. But you'd be absolutely fine to say it was chiasmus, which is CHIASMUS. So take your pick there.
But I have known what it is to live like a gentleman, mon ami. I do not say it to boast, But the other day I was trying to compute how many mistresses I have had in my life, and I made it out to be over 200. Yes, at least 200. Ah, well. Ça reviendra. Victory is to him who fights the longest. Courage! Etc., etc. Boris had a queer, changeable nature. He always wished himself back in the army, but he had also been a waiter long enough to acquire the waiter's outlook. Though he had never saved more than a few thousand francs, he took it for granted that in the end he would be able to set up his own restaurant and grow rich. All waiters, I afterwards found, talk and think of this. It is what reconciles them to being waiters. Boris used to talk interestingly about hotel life. "Waiting is a gamble," he used to say. "You may die poor, you may make your fortune in a year. You are not paid wages, you depend on tips, 10% of the bill, and the commission from the wine companies on champagne corks. Sometimes the tips are enormous. The barman at Maxim's, for instance, makes 500 francs a day. More than 500 in a season. I have made 200 francs a day myself. It was at a hotel in Biarritz in the season. The whole staff, from the manager down to the plongeurs, was working 21 hours a day. 21 hours work and 2.5 hours in bed for a month on end. Still, it was worth it at 200 francs a day. You never know when the stroke of luck is coming. Once, when I was at the Hotel Royal, an American customer sent for me before dinner and ordered 24 brandy cocktails. I brought them all together on a tray in 24 glasses. "Now, garçon," said the customer, he was drunk, "I'll drink 12 and you drink 12, and if you can walk to the door afterwards, you get 100 francs. I walked to the door, and he gave me 100 francs. And every night, for 6 days, he did the same thing. 12 brandy cocktails, then 100 francs. A few months later, I heard he had been extradited by the American government, embezzlement. There is something fine, do you not think, about these Americans?"
Slight bit of bathos there, isn't it, at the end of that little anecdote about the American and the kind of the come down after the generosity. We learned that the American is essentially a thief and has embezzled money from the government or from some big business. So it undermines the integrity of the American, and this sort of largesse and the benevolence of this man actually turns out to be a thief. And then that final question there's something fine do you not think about these Americans. He's admiring the roguish quality of the Americans. So there's a bathos in that phrase and in that whole section, I would say, as well. This isn't Orwell. This is Boris, isn't it? Giving us this. So we can't really credit Orwell, but like with Thunder, we can credit the way in which he has arranged these and a way in which he's pulled out and selected certain examples and extracts from these anecdotes and people he's met. And it just gives us a flavour of the sort of sense of humour and the sensibilities of the people he meets in Paris. And I think that sense of bathos is something which runs through, well, possibly not just the French. I think it's part of the human condition, I think, isn't it? To kind of build things up and then undermine it at the end.
I liked Boris, and we had interesting times together playing chess and talking about war and hotels. Boris used often to suggest that I should become a waiter. "The life would suit you," he used to say. "When you are in work with 100 francs a day and a nice mistress, is not bad. You say you go in for writing. Writing is bosh. There is only one way to make money at writing, and that is to marry a publisher's daughter. But you would make a good waiter if you shaved that moustache off. You are tall, and you speak English. Those are the chief things a waiter needs. Wait till I can bend this accursed leg, mon ami, and then, if you are ever out of a job, come to me." Now that I was short of my rent and getting hungry, I remembered Boris's promise and decided to look him up at once. I did not hope to become a waiter so easily as he had promised, but of course I knew how to scrub dishes, and no doubt he could get me a job in the kitchen. He had said that dishwashing jobs were to be had for the asking during the summer. It was a great relief to remember that I had, after all, one influential friend to fall back on.
And that's it for this chapter. I'll see you again for chapter 5 next time.